Here's why I personally like a direct mount sight more than a dovetail sight. So essentially I could get this same sight either with a dovetail or with a direct mount. And there's different lengths and mounts too. I personally like this style Spot Hogg, the Fast Eddie NE with the direct mount, because this distance is shorter, allows me to have a really tight pin gap because this is a little bit closer to the bow. It's actually optimized for torque tuning. For some of you out there, that might seem like a word that you don't understand, but I've done this a lot over the years for my sight length. So I've really settled on a length that I feel is super accurate in regards to torque tuning, and it kind of covers just a broad spectrum of draw lengths. The other thing I like about a direct mount sight that's a little bit closer to the bow as well is that when I set my bow down and I choose my stabilizer lengths accordingly, when I set my bow down, I'm protecting my sight from getting in the mud and the crud. So that's why on my personal hunting rig, this length is how it is, and my stabilizer length is how it is as well. But in regards to a dovetail specifically, what I've found over the years, and this is through decades of competing as a professional, but then also being out as a hunter, I just realized that the more bulletproof your setup is, the less things that move, the more success you have, because it's just less room for failure. So with any type of dovetail type sight, you're talking about two fittings. You're talking about a receiver and you're talking about the sight extension bar. There's going to be some play in there regardless. Some sights have more than others. This sight's very good. But there is still some play, and on some sites, like for example, this is one of my old target sites, there was quite a bit of play this way too, and if your sight has some of that, especially depending on where this lockdown knob is for an extension sight, when this starts to get locked down, it'll actually kick that sight in a certain direction, and the tighter you tighten it, the more it can move it. So what that's going to mean is if you get somewhere and you're traveling with a sight that's off your bow, and then you're putting it back on and you're tightening it down, or if someone else tightened it down differently, or if you didn't get it perfectly seated in one of the holes, then you can have a slight variation in a hunting situation that's going to definitely be noticeable. But in a target situation at a competition, you're definitely going to notice any of those micro adjustments that were made because you're not seating a dovetail exactly the same as the last time you had shot it. So what that means is, and that's why you go to a target archery event and there's an official practice end day or an official practice day, because they want to make sure you can get your sight and your bow all put back together, get everything locked down, and then do a little bit of shooting and make sure that you re-zero everything. You know, like on this site, had a little indicator needle to where if I got to an event, once I locked everything down, if I was maybe a yard or a yard and a half off, I might move to that new position, make sure I'm definitely zeroed in perfectly, but then just move my indicator needle here so that I could re-sight in. The other thing is on a lot of the dovetails, on the knobs themselves, they actually have like a little Delrin bushing or something on the end, and as those start to squash down from use, it will change how they seat in there. Now certainly you look at target archery over the years, and most target archers have sights that have a lot of adjustability, but I know for me personally, when I went to an event and I set up my bow and spent time on the practice range sighting it in, I wasn't changing it and moving it. The more you take something off and put it back on, the less likely you are to just get it to repeat back where it needs to be. Now back when I actually had a multi-pin head that was on a target type sight. This is one of my very first sights that were on my hunting bow so I could shoot longer yardages. When I look at this sight, even back then, I cut off this extension bar. I brought it closer to my bow so that I could protect it how I showed you. But I also did not use a knob like that. I used a set screw and put that thing into place, got it as tight as I could, and it stayed on my hunting bow in that fixed position. So I personally, on my hunting setups, and I definitely say that I'm more of a hunter now than I am a target archer, but I just like things to be locked down, bulletproof, and not able to move. The more different male-female connections you have, the more opportunity you have for that misalignment. So I just like the security of fully locking it down. I know a lot of the bows right now have the ability to adjust those lengths. If you adjust them, try to put them in a place to where they can still travel properly in your travel bow case so that you're not always removing that and having to put it back on in a location. As a hunter, I'm not always able to have a great place to do practicing depending on how remote I'm traveling. So the more bulletproof I am to begin with, the more bulletproof my equipment's going to be when I open that case and I'm able to pull it out without having to put it all back together.